Welcome back, you guys, to the Butterfly SZN podcast. I have a very special guest today. We talk about quantum leaps. We talk about baking a cake without the oven and with ingredients. We get into childhood trauma and how that's impacted life, outsourcing safety to men. We get into a lot of things. You're going to love this episode, and you're going to love Danielle as much as I love her, too. Welcome to the Butterfly SZN podcast. I'm so happy to have you here, Danielle. In this circumstance, I'm truly grateful for you being able to share and open your heart with my audience today. A little bit of backstory for you guys listening or watching. Danielle was one of the first beta people to go through the Butterfly SZN journal. Or at least my general framework. I literally brought a bunch of papers and I'm like, let me just see how this works. But anyways, I don't take that lightly. I don't take that energy that you shared with me at that point lightly, and even today lightly. So I just want to thank you and honor you for allowing me to have you as my guest on the podcast today.
I'm so happy to be here, even though I got to see the secret manuscript. That's what it felt like, to be able to go through that, and also to be witness to your own evolution during that whole process and what you became in the process of making this beautiful thing for people to go through and digest. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we drop in, you had suggested that we really, truly drop in.
Yeah. And
you are a phenomenal practitioner, Reiki master. Can I say master?
You can say master.
Reiki master.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you could guide us in a more fitting drop-in.
Absolutely. When I was driving here this morning, I kept thinking, how do we make sure that the right people, that it hits the right ears? And how do we make sure your message is getting into the right hands and people who are ready for it, or people who are searching for it? And so I was like, let's bless this conversation in order for us to, first off, just be here and be present in what we're talking about. And so people who are listening can don't close your eyes if you're driving in your car. But if you're on a little walk, you can soften the eyelids and just take a few seconds right here just to drop in. You game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and just close off the eyes or just settle in. If you are able to sit down, get steady in your seat and just start to notice your breath. On your next inhale, just feeling the chest rise. And on the exhale, thinking about allowing the bottom half of your body to become heavy. If you're walking, feeling yourself planted on the earth. If you're in your car, feeling held by your car seat. Knowing that there's nowhere else to be but in this exact moment, right here, right now. We call on the divine light that is always with us and within us to illuminate anything that we need to see or feel, anything we need to hear, anything we need to digest or be exposed to in this conversation. We ask that the earth hold us steady in this mission, in this moment, so that we feel nourished and held and grounded. And we ask that any of the beautiful angelic beings or spirits and guides that are always with us make themselves known, maybe through a word or a synchronicity or a sign that we may speak into existence in this conversation. We are so incredibly grateful to be here today with you and with one another and with this message. We thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Beautiful drop in. And that's just a testament of who you are and the light that you always have. Now I want to go deep.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the reason why I asked you on this podcast today, which you know, but we're just kind of getting the listeners, watchers up to speed, is because we went through the journal together. I wanted to truly highlight the transformation that happened with the journal.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful, and much like many transformations, sometimes it's a little bit painful. And I want you to steer the ship because I'm mindful of all that has to transpire when you do transform, right? And I would love to just start with, what did it bring up out of you? What was something that you were unaware of prior to? The ick. You know, can we talk about the ick for a second?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I fine with it, but ever since I started hearing that phrase or term on Love is Blind,
Oh yeah.
it drives me insane. I don't know what it is. I know it. I felt it. I see it. But when people say the ick, I'm like, where did this come from? Where did this phrase come from? But tell me more about the ick.
That's so funny. I've never watched that show.
Really?
Yeah. So it must just be something in the collective
I
right
think
now.
It's definitely in the ethos happening a ton right now.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, it's like this really fertile space to be in, actually.
Okay.
Because you're excavating anything that's buried in the bones, in the cells, right? And you and I have talked about this a lot, and that's a lot of what I talk about in my work, is like we have these stories that are so deeply embedded in our bones, in our cells, that are operating all the damn time. And we're just like, oh yeah, this seems like the right thing to do, in autopilot so often, right? And it's like when we have the opportunity to sit down, to go into energetic healing sessions, to talk through and pull out this work through this beautiful process you've created, it just reminds us like, oh, that's still operating.
Right.
Oh my God, that's why I did that the other day, right?
Right.
When you feel like you're just like coasting sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I love you always say, you know, you're taking another lap. And then you're like, wait a second, didn't I pass this 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I thought we already went by that 7-Eleven, right? Like, why are we back here?
That's what
the ick is. It's like,
yes,
it's like convenience store snacks that are stuck
stuck in your body, and you're like, should I grab that snack? Probably not.
I know it's going to make me feel bloated, but you know, so like that feeling of how do we come back to what that is? And by the way, you're going to keep coming back to it. You take the lap, but you're in a different perspective every time, hopefully. But you have to do this work to get that elevated view.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Where did the ick come from? Like, what was
Yeah.
the root of it, right? Like in the
Yeah.
journal, we start with identifying feelings, and we allow the
Yeah.
feelings to kind of navigate us to an unmet need, where we've been outsourcing that unmet need,
Yeah.
who should actually be filling that need for you, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, what is the inception of the ick?
For me, and this has been something I've come back to, you know, in years of therapy, energy work, plant medicine ceremonies, safety, right? And
Yeah.
you and I, we sat with that for a while because you're like, oh my God, I also feel that one as well. And safety is so important. And when you have a childhood does not beget safety, or you had numerous times in your life where you felt completely unsafe, and physically you were, if you look back as an adult and you're like, I would never put my child in that position. Mm-hmm. And I say all this with love. You know, right. I'm at a very different place right now with, and I can speak to this too, my mom and I have had therapy conversations, and we've been in the spot, you know, the position of healing so deeply over the past decade.
Yeah.
And so she's also opening up to talking about it more too. And the thing is, though, you can have repaired the relationship. And so for me, the relationship feels so repaired and loving and sweet and kind and respectful, but the story still operates. And so us getting down to that point of like, oh my gosh, I've been outsourcing my safety for so long to, gosh, in this day and age, right? It's on a deeper level, right? It can be our partners. You know, I just went through a separation this year, and a lot of that has been uncovering where I outsourced my safety to him. And we met, you know, at a time where I was super vulnerable in 2019. I had like given up my corporate business bitch identity and had kind of like threw everything to the wind for a while. I traveled. I spent like most of my money. I was in that space of, because I took like a year and a half to kind of untangle 9 years of being in a startup and playing every role and never taking a day off. And I had to like kind of kill that identity because so much was wrapped up in it. And so he met me at this really, really interesting time of, I'd been doing the healing work on the side. I was like a secret healer at night, right? I had people come to my house, and I would do women's retreats, but I always had it under the guise of business and wellness and all these different things. And I was like, I have to step fully into this version of myself. And I felt like a baby giraffe, right? Like, just like, I don't know who I am. But he met me at that time, and it was beautiful because he met me. He literally received his first ever like energy healing session from me. And so, you know, it's like I was re-identifying who I was, but I kept reaching for him. And the course of our relationship for almost 4 years was that.
Yeah.
And he was doing it in his own way too. And don't worry, we're also in a place where we're very healthy and talking about these things now and trying to unpack it so we can grow and evolve.
Help me understand the correlation for someone listening, because I feel like in my journey, and I'm not sure if this was the same for you, but so many people can hear the words that you're saying, but don't know what that looks like actually. So if we can
get into the dirty,
if we can bridge, how did a chaotic or a childhood where you wanted safety, how does that attribute to choosing a partner where you're outsourcing the safety? What did that look like? What did that feel like? I mean, as a child, we only know what we only know at that moment in time. Yeah. Right? What does that look like growing up and then choosing a partner and then in that relationship?
Oh yeah. We can get really deep into this. You know, my long story short, my childhood, you know, like my crowning trauma I can wear as a hat, crown, right? Is my mother was going through a ton of mental, you know, illness and battling a bunch of things. And at that time we couldn't access the things that we do now. Right. You know, it was just shoving all types of medications, all types of things at her that were just exacerbating what was going on. And in reality, she has a giant Bible of trauma that she was working through that no one was addressing. Right. And so for me, around 5th grade, I was taken away from her by my father because of just being continuously put in really unsafe situations. And it just wasn't a healthy, safe place for me to be in. Right. And so my dad became my savior at a very young age. Right. And so men became my saving grace. Right.
It's like this pattern. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the players or anything. You just, that moment, if I'm understanding you correctly, what happened in that moment, what the meaning that you pulled from it was, a man can save me when I feel unsafe.
Absolutely. He's going to take care of me. And I was so safe with him, you know, and trust me, also not a saint. Love my father. He's got his own things, right? But he has been such a pillar of safety and steadiness for me my entire life. And I love him so much for that. And so from that age, like that kind of got etched into my mind. Oh, okay, that's safety when I'm vulnerable and scared. And fast forward to 2019, I was unsafe and scared. I had uprooted myself. I had, you know, done really well in the corporate world, but had been super frivolous with money because I was like, it was almost like I had to get rid of that because of the way I made it felt so out of an alignment and out of integrity for me. And so I was in this building phase. So everything was new. And I was like in that space again of who am I, like I said, and how do I show up in the world? And so he came in, you know, he on paper is so put together, had ran companies for years, financially was like, no, I got you. So like swooped in. I moved in with him to his home, you know, like the next house that we bought, he purchased for us. It was almost like I was just like, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm good. And that whole time I haven't been able to, and like, I feel much more in there's a scab now. Yeah. The wound is not gaping open. That's why I agreed to come talk about this.
Which is honorable, by the way. Yeah. With the work that I'm doing, I'm hypersensitive of all that becomes unearthed through this process. So I appreciate you coming here, talking from a scabbed place and not like a, give me some more bandages to stop the bleeding. We need a triage. Yes. We need a blood transfusion. I don't want to do that with my platform or anything. So I just want to just thank you for that.
Absolutely. This to me too feels like, and that's what I want people to understand. And I hope that with the interviews you're doing in this vein, it gives people permission to talk about these things. And it gives people the opportunity to realize like, oh yeah, I'm still dealing with that, but I can talk about it. Yeah. And I can express it. And half of the healing and the medicine is being able to speak to it.
Right.
From, like I said, it's almost like you get out of the shallow end of the pool and then you're looking over and you're like, oh, okay. I could have stood up the whole time. And that's what I was doing down there. And letting people have that example, I guess. Like, I'm willing to put myself out here to do that. And with my work too, you know, people come to me for a safe space. I don't share a lot about what I do because when they land on my social media page, when they land on my website, when they talk to me, I'm here to hold them. They don't need to hold my baggage. And so often I shy away from speaking to what I'm going through. So it's really nice to have an opportunity. This is a beautiful, safe container where I can speak to it and people can opt to listen to it.
Right.
Right. And it's not me being like, you guys would not believe what I just went through. Right. And so I'm so mindful of that line because I take in regards to what I do and how I hold people. I'm humbled by it. And I want to make sure people feel loved and safe in my presence.
Yes.
Right. We create the thing for others that usually we're searching for within ourselves so often.
Yes. To that.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about the outsourcing of safety in relationships. Did you realize, now that we've like laid the land of like, okay, where the pattern first started?
Yep.
When, at what point, what were you doing? What were you feeling? Where did there feel like a misalignment where you were like, oh my God, I'm doing it again?
When did we talk? I'm just kidding.
This is definitely December.
I feel like I knew all along from dipping my toe back into, you know, I constantly try to dip my toe back into therapy when I'm in those seasons of really needing support. And I identified it a couple years ago when we were going through a separation, a temporary separation. But it's interesting. I never did anything about it. Now that I think about it, I didn't change anything. I kept holding out for like, you know, when you're holding on to something and you're like, no, it'll hold together. It'll hold together. And you have like a Band-Aid on like two ships trying to move apart, right? It just doesn't work. And we both deeply need to grow and evolve in the ways in which we have mirrored each other's. Can I say anything I want? Yeah.
You can say anything.
Bullshit. Yeah.
Want.
So like it's so apparent. And when you are in partnership, and I want people to realize that too, like I'm not going to sit here and like throw stones at him. He did some things and he has owned to them that were really out of line, really out of integrity. And at the same time, he's operating from the same shit, right? His own trauma response. He's getting help. He's doing all the things right now. But that's not my responsibility. My responsibility right now is to create safety within my own being and how I show up in the world. So it feels like this deep evolution. So I can't say like a specific time. I know I was aware.
Yeah.
But there wasn't like forward movement with that awareness.
I want to talk about the awareness for a second because I feel like, you know, the journal is merely a vessel to point you back to you. Every question in there is pointing you back to you and then you kind of guide the ship. It's just giving you like a loose framework to work with that takes you to the places that will create the transformation. And I feel like we all have like a little like, this is the crazy, this is not crazy. This is a loop of a record playing.
Yeah.
We all have this loop that's playing in our mind where you know that something isn't quite right, but it's so quiet until it's not.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, we all kind of know, like when you ask somebody, hey, like what's the thing? We know, but we choose to not accept the invitation to explore that for growth. What was it? What was the thought process around choosing to not accept that invitation? Mine is just ignorance is bliss.
We're fine. Everything's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm just feeling anxious today. It's not a big deal. I just need to breathe.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, that is the big piece too, right? Our body literally starts screaming. I always tell clients, I'm like, let her whisper to you before she starts screaming, because she will scream if you're not listening. Do as I say, not as I do.
But here's the thing, though. It's not even a do as you say and not as you do. I just want to hold a mirror to you. When we work with practitioners and we work in different modalities of healing things, oftentimes we think, oh my God, they're perfect, they're this or that. But the reason why you can talk about something from an embodied wisdom place, it's I've done this is my experience, here's how I can help you.
100%.
No one is perfect. And I actually think it's commendable to be able to say, this is what I went through, this is what I'm working on, even if it is as recent as this past year, right? Or last year. And so it is a do as I say and not as I do, but also like, I'm a human being. You are a human being. You're a human being.
100%. And I think it gives, like I said, it just gives people permission. Like, being human is messy because this tape and this track that's playing gets embedded in us when we are from teeny tiny little babies. Like, I know we've all had this moment around the holidays, right? We all just navigated some stuff, and we just had a holiday this past weekend for when we're recording. You're sitting there and then you hear your parents say something and you're like, oh my God, I say that. Or you say something and you're like, that's something they would say.
Yes.
And it's like, that is the most tactile reminder of like the loop. Is just, I always say it's a computer program. It's like a floppy disk that is just so lodged in there, and you got to get it out. We're upgrading. We're not using that anymore.
Right.
We're airdropping.
We're airdropping.
But that's such a good analogy for healing, because it can be as simple as the airdrop.
Talk to me more about that.
Once you have the awareness piece, so it has to be the awareness piece plus the fire. Like, oh, it's too uncomfortable. It is too uncomfortable here anymore. And the vision of who you know yourself to be is so bright. And she's like sitting over there and you're like, I want to be where she's at. That hunger that comes through your body, like those things have to be aligned. So I tell people too, you don't have to heal this thing or work through it until you're ready. This is something that's been gifted to you in this lifetime to be your story. Why rush it? You know when you get to the end of a book and you're like, oh, that was so juicy and good. And then I read it too fast. I used to be like the queen of getting through books in like 3 days because I would get so in them. And it's like, this is your book.
Right.
Why do you want to rush it? You're going to be working on these things and being aware of them until the day you die.
Right. So here's a question.
Yeah.
Because that's true. But then you might have somebody who is like, I'm not rushing it as an excuse to avoid.
Correct.
What is the difference?
Whew. That's a good one, because I did it.
It's this
I'm in my feminine. I'm fine. Let's let life happen.
This awareness loop. The awareness loop is that I have so much awareness about my problems, my coping mechanisms, the needs that are unmet. I can talk to you all day about my issues, but the awareness loop is missing action, right? You said awareness and fire, which is like just uncomfortable being in this same situation. But that is not enough, because then you just go back to awareness, fire, and you start thinking, why am I the only person that can't change my reality? But you're missing the action. Yeah. So talk to me about what might someone be experiencing when they're saying, oh, I'm not rushing it, as a way to pacify somebody or pacify themselves, really, and keep them from growing.
I'm going to have an unpopular answer, I think, for this one. Let them be. Who was it? Someone spoke that we saw together. I think it was at Powerhouse. Something about like, let God handle it. It's like, at some point, if we're in relationship to that person, let them be. Let them be, because like you always say too, you can't force the butterfly out of the cocoon, or they are gook, right? They are gunky. And a lot of times, the more attention we put on someone else, I can say this from being literally in partnership where we were doing this to each other, of wanting it shifting, wanting this shift, wanting this thing to happen. Let them be. And the more attention you put on them not being that thing, then the energy is just going to them not being the thing. Right? And I think people get tired of their own bullshit fast enough. But fast enough is going to be different for you, for me, for every single person. Right.
I love that you said that in relation to a person. Because typically, we might always think it's someone else. And I've noticed now in my own journey, the moment I say something that's pointing at someone else, I'm like, okay, what can I do about this? What can I do about this to change what I'm frustrated with? Now, I want you to speak to the person that is listening who is saying that to themselves. I'm just in flow. I'm not trying to rush it, right? In relation to someone, 100%, leave it, because there's nothing you can do about it. You can only do about yourself. But now I want to talk to the girl or boy listening that is saying, I'm just not rushing my journey Taking time. You don't want to read a book too quick, right? Like,
Yeah.
why would all of the same rhetoric that does apply
Yeah.
in some scenarios, but could also be used to pacify or stunt or stop you from truly seeing yourself. What would you say to that?
To go be still. Like, you need to go be still and actually sit with what you're saying. So it's like that piece of, can you drop so deep into your body where you can actually hear what you want?
So let's use easier words. I say easier only because there are some people listening who are like all about the spiritual stuff, right? So what does it mean to be still? What does it mean to drop into your body? Like, walk me through that. And I want to know, where do you start to actually hear yourself, right?
Absolutely. I think the piece, and I'm trying to think of like a 3-tiered way to break this down. So if like you are a person who you have spiritual practices, you've read the books, you do the things. So often are you doing it's like, this is the top level here. Are you doing the things because you know you're supposed to do the things? Are you actually doing them intentionally? Are you actually dropping in? I know so many people who go to yoga every single day, who meditate every single day, and they're not in their body because they're checking it off a list.
Yeah.
You know, with like the biohacking stuff that's, you know, a craze now and all that, you know, where we're at in society and what things people are doing. Okay, I cold plunged. I did this. I did that. Great. Do you even remember how you felt in that moment when you were doing that thing? Or did you just rush through it and checked it off? So for that person, how are you like taking like the exercise we did when we got here? Are you dropping into your body? And the big thing I pull into practice now is, are you asking, where is source? Where is universe? Where is God having me serve today? Because if you can't get out of your own way, can you ask where you're needed in the collective? And if you you will hear a call, and the shame that will come when you don't follow that call, and the misalignment that comes, and the things that happen in that point, like in that little pocket, that sometimes becomes uncomfortable enough to help the shift.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is so good, because I feel like that process has happened to me in the last 5 years. Yeah. That exact thing. Talk to me about when it comes to being in your body. I just want to like go back to this a little bit.
Yeah.
What is it to not be in your body? Are you thinking about a bunch of different things? You're like, I can't wait till these 3 minutes are over so I can get out of the cold plunge. Or when you're meditating, like, what might someone be hearing or listening that can be a sign, oh, I wasn't in my body when I did this, versus I was in my body when I did this? Because I think a lot of people aren't in their body a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I've been doing some like recon on my own, and I'm like, am I present right now? Or I wasn't present. Where was I? Or even in conversation, I'll be so zoned out thinking about something completely different. And I'm still like, yeah. I know that that's me not being in my body, but I want to talk about these things so someone can be able to find themselves in what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I'll come back to it. So I was like, I want to go back to the person who's like brand new at this stuff too, and give some stuff for that. But the piece about being in the body, okay, can we go like out there for a minute?
Yes.
Okay, great. So often in practice now, people will come in and I can feel, it's almost like their soul is like hovering above their bones in their body. And during session, I can feel it. Their energy just go, ugh, and like drop back down into the body.
Yeah.
It's almost like we have all these things we need to do, and we're thinking, overthinking, and this thing is just like going bananas, right? Also, another piece of this is so many of us coming back to safety have had moments where we did not feel safe in our bodies. So why does our soul want to hang out there? That's like walking by the crack house and you're like, I'm not going in there, right?
Did you see that just hit? I'm like, oh, I get it. Why, when you don't feel safe in your body, you might not feel safe in your decision making. You might not feel safe in the people that you're around because of the situations that are happening to you. So it's easier to outsource that safety to who knows whomever.
Yeah.
Than to trust yourself. It's why people can't I'm like, all of this is just airdropping into me right now. I'm like, this is why people can't make decisions, because you don't trust yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not, and you don't realize that. You're just like, I don't know why it's so difficult for me to make a decision. You don't feel safe.
You don't feel safe in your body. And by the way, people have good reasons to not. I'm not saying this is like people who have gone through sexual assault, all these things that can be so jarring to the body, or they've had illness take over their body. With women, right? We talk about pregnancy, all these things that happen that you're like, I don't trust you because it's betrayed you. Or you can assume that if your body planted you in a position, I have a story from childhood, long story short, but like where I was literally in a house where like a gun was shooting over my head. And then at that point you think, my body brought me here. I'm in my body right now. Is this safe? Do I even want to be in this body? Right? Because you disassociate, and that's a disassociation. That's all the things that people start to, have with really in-depth trauma. And so how do we allow you to, like I said, exhale and be like, imagine your soul sitting into your body like it's sitting in a car and it's like, oh, I can lean back. I can take the brakes. I can like sit here for a minute. I can take my foot off the gas. And doing those practices is literally that image sometimes for people. I'll say that, hey, I want you to think about when the next time you exhale with your entire body. Think about every cell in your body exhaling with you. And then you kind of just yoke together from that point. Mind you, guys, half the time, this may be something you experience 1 to 2 minutes a day. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's the practice. I have meditation practices where this morning I do a self Reiki practice every morning and I move and breathe with it and I'll say mantras sometimes. This morning, I didn't sleep well last night. It wasn't fun. It didn't feel as like juicy as it normally does, but I did it because we have to flex the muscle of saying I'm in devotion to being in my body.
Right.
It's coming back into relationship. If you have a faith-based practice too, we talk about being in relationship to God and source in the universe. Well, this was a gift from that entity. So can you start by appreciating and having gratitude for the things that you were gifted from source? Right? Because it's a miracle.
Right.
Like literally a miracle.
What might be some repercussions or symptoms might be the best question. What might be some symptoms of not being in your body? And I don't want to say, because you feel unsafe, right? Because that's easy to understand just logically.
Yeah.
I want to identify symptoms of what it might look like to not be in your body.
Absolutely. Overactive mind is a huge one. Doubt and fear, all those things that we talk about all the time to overcome. Because if you think about it, if you were fully immersed and present in your vessel, in your own vision of what you're calling it, in the present moment of understanding this present moment is a miracle, there's no fear there. There's no doubt there. You're just there, right? Like you're just fully present to that point. So feeling those feelings, anxiety, I suffered from panic attacks for years before I found this work. And now I still dance. I always call it dancing with anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful I have practices now. It doesn't escalate. But I still have days where I'm like, oh, I got to double down on like getting into my body, getting into a bath, right? Go back into the womb space. Like let yourself sink back into your body. But the big ones are those feelings that we all have.
Yeah.
And so often we try to think our way through things. One of the reasons I love going through your process is it's like you're thinking, but you're having to excavate within the body. So it's like you're having, do you remember Miss Frizzle?
No.
Magic School Bus?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, right?
Yes.
It's almost like you're going into the in your little bus.
Yeah.
And you're going to go see like, oh, that's really activated right now because there's a story from childhood sitting down at my left knee.
Yeah.
All of our chronic pain is all, can be mapped back to those really poignant moments in our childhood where we had something happen. And by the way, this can be something that happened to your mother.
Right.
Or your grandmother. And it's in you because you share the DNA. The cells are already operating on that old floppy disk.
Right.
So it's like getting back to that space. And today I actually wore, because I was having this conversation, and anytime we can speak to it, like I said, it's medicine. These are my grandmother's earrings. And my mom, this is a ring my dad gave my mom when they were like 18. Look how big those diamonds are.
Right. That's so beautiful. I want to talk about this, like, generational trauma. It wasn't until I got, like, truly into this work that I was able to understand what that even means.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I would love for you to unpack that with your experience. How might this outsourcing of safety or lack of safety continue to be passed on in different avenues, probably not just in partnership?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a volume of books, right? We all have. I won't go deep into this piece, but like, every person, we have a gift of stories that were given to us. And so often we operate under that. So it could be something not even, and that's why I'm saying when we're going through these processes or you're going through Aisha's book, be so gentle with yourself, because this thing that's coming up may not even be yours. You just got it, just like you inherited your mother's eyes or her hair color. So can you be so gentle with that? And curious. That's why the book can be fun, right? Because it's curiosity.
Yeah.
And so, personally, every woman in my family has outsourced her safety to men. I mean, the stories. But that's why I try to work with their energy all the time, because I'm like, we do this for those women too. I'm assuming a lot of your listeners are women. So
Yes, yeah, we can go there.
We can go there. It's like, how do we hold those women in the highest, because they're the reason we're here.
Right.
And even if they yucked it up and caused a lot of ick in our lives, now that we're unpacking, like, that again was part of the story that we chose when we landed in the body. So are you going to get curious about it? Actually, this is great to wrap back around to, when are you going to make a move? Are you going to get curious about it and be playful with it? Because healing and the healing process can be playful and very interesting. It's like reading a detective novel and going so deep in it to find out who the fuck you are. Because when you know who you are and you're so in your body, you are unshakable. You walk into a room and no one can knock you off because you know who you are.
Right.
But like, stepping into that for every generation that came before us is so important. And I've seen things, one of the gifts that comes through for me is I see generational trauma in the body. And sometimes I'll see a vision and I'm like, well, who did this happen to? And a lot of times, half the time, the person will be like, that's my mom.
Right.
That's her story.
Yeah.
That person's never told me their mother's story because they came there for them, right?
Right.
And so often if we get really deep to the root of it, we're just repeating the patterns that were already within us in the first place. So like, my grandmother both of my grandmothers outsourced safety to the men in their lives. My mom's mom, especially. And then we get so angry when they didn't provide the safety, right? And bless her, she's with us all the time now. She's passed, but her story was so wild, the way she would consistently outsource to men. And then my mom did it, right? And what's so interesting is my mom can recall being in really healthy relationships, and it was too much for her because she had not done the work to receive that, right?
Yes. It's so interesting because I think people think that, when you have this like instant energetic, I was listening to the Almost 30 podcast, they were talking about codependency, and I'm like, oh my God, this is everything that I've been working on.
Yep.
But they were saying how there's this like twin flame spark when you meet someone. It's like energetic and you're like, oh my God, I've never felt like this before.
Yep.
They're my soulmate, but it's really just a trauma response, and your body's like, no. But we don't know this, and we end up actually rejecting or repelling people who are safe because you're like, there's no spark there. That's how I felt when I met my husband. I remember being like, I don't know. I was telling my best friend, I don't know. Like, it doesn't feel like passionate. And she was like, well, what's passion? And I was like explaining like my exes and how we'd like break up and make up. And she's like, okay, that's not passion. That's toxic.
Correct.
Somebody who makes you feel safe, you don't have those elevated experiences with. And some people without the knowledge might repel that. So it's so interesting that you say that your mom has had healthy relationships, but she's like, nah. But it's because you didn't do the work to come back to yourself to realize, oh no, this isn't what I want anymore. I'm not taking this lap.
Yeah. And it's been beautiful with her now speaking to that, and she's able to see it and able to be in it so deeply. And Here's the other thing I want to share about this is, and maybe you guys have experienced this. I've had moments where I've had an aha moment with like going through the process in your book or going through a therapy session. I'll have an aha moment. My mom will call me that afternoon and she's had a therapy session and she will have had the exact same aha moment. So when I say there's like this golden thread that runs through
110%
the lineage, like it is so real. And I've had I can think of two specific instances where that's happened in the last couple of years where I was even like, what? Like, how powerful is that?
It really is powerful. I want to share this story with you. I did a guided meditation with my therapist. I microdosed, went to hot yoga, so I was really dropped in.
Feeling it.
Then did a meditation, and my mom was in the other room. It was Christmas, and I got so much clarity on like why I had resistance around children. And it was really because, you know, my mom would bring her boyfriend around, and then I felt like I was a third party and I'd be loveless, so I don't want to add a third party to the mix, all of these things. Yeah. I had that aha moment there, and my mom, her energy changed. It was like not great. She ended up leaving my house early, and I'm like, what happened? What happened? She leaves, goes home. She was like, I was laying down and I got this like really clear vision, and it was like God telling me to stop doing to you what my mom did to me. And I was like, what in the alternate universe just happened?
The simulation is broken.
No, literally. And my therapist was like, yeah, that's how this works. I'm like, what do you mean that's how this works? Like, all I had to do is meditate the whole time. I could have fixed this. Obviously, it's not that simple. But yes, to the golden string theory, which who knows if it's a theory or if you're just saying that at this point, we're coining it to be this golden string theory, is that it does run through your lineage. And I'm like, I don't know what God and the angels were doing to conspire when I had that meditation that prompted my mom to be like, no more. Yeah. So that's so beautiful.
And that's what I was saying about, can you get curious? Because don't you want that type of situation to happen for you?
Right.
And it can be simple.
Right.
It can be the moment where you just say, oh, no, not anymore. And that can change the course. That tiny little sentence can change the course of your life. That's a quantum leap. But what people don't talk about is that quantum leap has been you going through years of self-awareness, of doing the work, of doing all these things. And then all of a sudden, it's like all the ingredients finally get into the cake batter and you got a cake. But maybe, we were out of some things for a while. It was COVID. We couldn't get flour.
Or maybe you didn't know that you were the oven the whole time to bake the actual cake. Yeah. You have all these ingredients and you're like, bake my cake, bake my cake, bake my cake.
Giving it to everybody else.
Yes, and no one wants to bake your fucking cake, bitch, because you should be baking your own cake. But you don't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for you, for being here, for dropping in with me, for dropping in with our guests, for being vulnerable, and also being able to be vulnerable from a healed place.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for this episode, for our friendship, for the growth. So thank you.
Thank you. This was, again, speak to it. I feel like I got another layer. Like I got a fancy Band-Aid on it today, right? You get to have that other layer of healing when you can speak your truth, be witnessed in it, and seen. And yeah, I hope somebody hears something and they're like, oh, damn. And then all is well in the world.
Right. Accept the invitation to transform from a curious place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say thank you so much for being here? It means the world to me that we're growing together. So if there's someone that you thought of while listening, please share it with them too. And when you share it, let them know that they're not on this journey alone. But also, if you just love this episode, take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, and tag me at Aisha so I can thank you for hanging with me on this journey. Oh, and one more thing. Don't forget to rate and write a review with your favorite takeaway so this podcast can be shared with more people. And before I go, I want to thank you again for being here.